All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Clean Air Partnership workshop on applying an equity lens to active transportation. This is the first workshop that we are holding in a 5-part series of equity-related workshops we'll be holding throughout the year. So we are so excited that you're joining us today. My name is Emiko Newman. I am the Climate Accountability Intern with the Clean Air Partnership, and we're really excited to get started. Just to point out, if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat, just note your name and the municipality you're joining from. That would be excellent. We'd love to hear from you. So to start off with a land acknowledgement, CAP acknowledges that the stolen land on which we operate is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. At CAP, we recognize that many Indigenous peoples are particularly vulnerable to climate change and will be disproportionately impacted by its effects. Through our work, we are committed to disrupting ongoing approaches to climate governance that reproduce settler-colonial relations and systematically exclude Indigenous peoples from policymaking. And of course, simply stating a land acknowledgement itself does not quite feel like it's enough. For today, we wanted to additionally share with you all this really excellent video talking about these Indigenous-led bicycle tours. They're taking place in Winnipeg, and they combine Indigenous history with tourism and active transportation. It's very relevant to our presentation today. So we'll just be showing you this short clip now.
Oh, we don't hear the sound.
Sorry, you should be able to hear it.
The trail is a trail series. Every Sunday throughout the summer, we're going to meet at the forks and go for a tour around Winnipeg to visit places of significance of Indigenous history.
Part of traditional trails, first and foremost, is educating your own people about, this history and the area that we live in, and educating them about cycling and recreation. But it's also inviting non-Indigenous people to see, this is what we're trying to do to revitalize our culture.
One of our young men had never really ridden a bike before, so we were able to get a tandem bike and get him going, and he's talking about learning how to ride a bike now. It's pretty awesome. It's really important for our Indigenous youth to really understand the history and really know about the relationship between Canada and its Indigenous people. I think it's important for all peoples to really do this, and really it's incumbent upon people to learn and to get educated and to talk to one another. And our Indigenous young people are leading the way today, and they're learning.
We just wanted to get people together to experience the downtown region, places that are important to Winnipeg First Nations people. It has led into kind of a tourism model where we offer Indigenous interpretive content, and it is accessible by all. This model can be used anywhere in Canada, primarily from Indigenous people offering the content that they know is authentic.
A lot of the work that Adrian does in terms of cycling with Clear Paths fits around the TRC call to action for recreation. So a lot of our people suffer from major health issues, think of diabetes, and it's a health crisis, right?
This is something that I found in a Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. It's called Sport and Reconciliation, and this is a great way to start us being active and into the community.
Getting back onto the land is a really important part. It's a lot different than just hitting the gym, right? So being able to kind of combine traditional culture with something like cycling is really important for actually really tangibly reaching that call to action.
People can do this in their own communities, whether it be a major urban area or rural community of First Nations. You can get together and organize a weekly bike ride, a monthly bike ride, something to bring you together and enjoy your space in a positive way.
All right, thanks for sharing that, Devanshi. Super interesting and inspiring video. And we did want to share the results of this poll. Hopefully everyone's able to see it on your screen. We just wanted to get a sense of where folks are at in terms of their active transportation plans. It does seem like the majority of people here are in the process of implementing their plans. A bunch of folks are still in the development stages. A few people don't have any plans yet, and some are post-implementation. So really good mix of stages that people are at. And hopefully, no matter what stage you're at in your plan, this webinar today will be useful for you. So just to run through the agenda, we'll first be going through what is equity, making sure we're all on the same page. We'll be sharing with you this brand new resource hub that we just launched. Some of you may have taken a look at that. It was sent out to you prior to the meeting today. We'll be zooming in on one of the specific pages from the resource hub, which focuses on active transportation. Then we'll be sharing some examples of successful actions. Finally, we'll be going out into breakout rooms. So just to give you a heads up on that. And then we'll be closing with upcoming opportunities, and we should be wrapping up right around 11. So just to get started on equity, I'm sure everybody here has some understanding of what it is, but just to make sure we're all kind of working from the same definition, we're talking about equity as just and fair inclusion, where all individuals and communities have equal access to opportunities and resources to reach their full potential. So an equitable region is one in which all can participate and everybody can prosper in their communities, and where the benefits and the burdens are shared fairly. Now, when we talk about equity seeking or equity deserving groups, you might hear us using these terms. This refers to people who have disabilities, women, racialized groups, queer communities, low-income individuals, youth, seniors, and other marginalized or vulnerable communities. And when we're talking about climate change vulnerability, this refers to the degree to which individuals and places are at risk from climate change and their ability to cope with those impacts. It is important to remember that these equity-seeking groups that I just listed above, these are the folks who are disproportionately already being impacted by climate change. And so when we're thinking about applying an equity lens to our climate plans, these are the groups that we need to be thinking about the most, we need to be prioritizing. So when we're applying an equity lens to our climate actions, what does this actually mean? Essentially what I just said, it means considering the impacts of climate change on different communities, because not everybody is impacted equally, ensuring that the benefits of the solutions are being distributed fairly. And honestly, everybody wins in this situation. It's a win-win-win. Essentially, when we're applying an equity lens to our climate actions, there are so many co-benefits that can result. I've listed just a few of them here. So for instance, we can truly improve the livelihoods for these equity-deserving communities. We can make communities healthier, safer, and more accessible. We can also address oppression at the same time and advance anti-racism, advance reconciliation, and just generally build stronger public support for climate actions. And I think these things are so important to keep in mind because, you know, active transportation and climate action in general is not just about the environment. It's also about our health. It's about our safety. It's about our general well-being. So there are so many co-benefits that we can make a reality if we are implementing our climate action plans through this equity lens. Now, some of you may have seen our resource hub. We just launched it very recently. Essentially, we held a workshop back in November. This was a workshop based on climate and equity synergies kind of generally. And what came out of that was this hub. It's basically, we want it to be a one-stop shop that municipal staff can go to when they need a little bit of support with trying to bring in equity to their climate plans. We want it to be ever expanding. It's this kind of continuously updated resource. We want to hear from you. We want to know, if you want to add to it, we would love your input. If you have questions about it, we would love to hear that too. And so the aim behind holding all of these workshops, such as this one today, is so that we can get these crowdsourcing efforts going, so that we can focus in on specific parts of the hub, get all of your input, and then go back to the hub, make it bigger and better. We're not going to be going through the hub today. Hopefully you can take some time to do that after the webinar, but we are going to be focusing in on a few pages taken from that hub, specifically active transportation. So what we did was we came up with this list of 7 top-level questions that can be applied to any climate action, any climate plan. And what we're going to be going through now is all of those questions one by one. These slides were taken directly from the hub, but they were condensed because we couldn't fit everything onto these next few slides. So the first question that you can ask when you're thinking of your AT plan, of course, very basic. What are you trying to achieve with this action? So in this case, we jotted down just a few notes. Of course, we want to make cities and communities more safe, more reliable, more accessible, and more affordable, particularly for the equity-seeking groups. In addition, ideally, we can also support local equity-deserving businesses through infrastructure construction, for example, and then also enhance social connection and well-being overall. The next question that we can ask ourselves is, who has traditionally participated in or benefited from this action? Super important question to ask. In this case, we've identified that when it comes to AT, it tends to be predominantly white, predominantly middle or high income communities who are benefiting, which leads us to question number 3, what groups are most in need of this action? Importantly, the answer to that often differs from the answer to number 2. So who is most in need? Again, it tends to be the marginalized, disadvantaged communities. Disproportionately, these communities have poor transit infrastructure. They're really lacking in AT services. They might not have safe sidewalks to walk on, for instance. They might not have safe bicycle lanes to use. And then, as a result of this, they also tend to be the communities, for instance, living right next to a huge highway. There might be, as a result of that, just a lot of car pollution in the area. And so critical to be specifically asking yourself when you're trying to think about your plans, who's really in need. And that might differ from who has benefited in the past. So number 4, what has prevented these groups from participating? Often it comes down to the consultation or the community engagement as being lacking or only focusing on certain areas. It's really important to be specifically prioritizing these equity-seeking groups because too often they are left out of the consultation process and their voices simply aren't being heard. We can go to the next slide, Devanshi. Thank you. So what design can address the barriers for those most in need? As I just mentioned, really the most important thing here is community outreach and engagement. A lot of effort has to be put in when it comes to this stage. One thing that can be done is multiple methods. So there are so many ways that you can go out and engage your community. You can send out a survey, you can do telephone calls, you can go door to door, you can stand on the street and talk to people walking by. There are so many different options, and what's important to ask is, whose voices are you capturing? If you're sending out a survey, you're going to get very different results from if you're standing on the street talking to folks who walk by you. It's also important to think, what languages are you conducting your outreach in? Are you only using English? That's going to definitely limit who's able to respond. Where are you doing this engagement? One thing that you can also do is bring in community members themselves to go engage with the community. They know the area best. Maybe they you know, speak the same language as the other community members, things like that. So it's really important to be putting in a lot of effort when it comes to this stage and trying to make sure that the most voices possible are being heard. Disaggregating data is also very important. If we're not collecting race-based data, for instance, or gender-based data or age-based data, there's a lot of really that can have some serious implications if we're not paying attention to kind of the specific groups who are being impacted by your climate plans, your climate actions. Number 6, can you identify any negative impacts this action may cause? So when it comes to active transportation, one of the biggest negative consequences that can unfortunately result is gentrification. Because as we're bringing in better infrastructure and the communities become safer and more accessible, that can really raise prices. Rents can go up. The area becomes just more popular. And so unfortunately, that can have the adverse effect of pushing out the very people that we are trying to support. So really important to keep that in mind. And the last question, who has not yet been engaged that would be good to engage? So again, kind of already said this, very important to be prioritizing the equity-seeking communities. They're the ones who tend to be left out and forgotten. As a result, tend to be lacking in active transportation services. So that was just a very quick overview of what's featured on this hub. But of course, many of you here today are experts. We want to hear from you. So what we would love is if, as I was going through all of those points, you felt like, oh, there are all these things that are missing. We want to hear from you. You might have additional high-level questions that you think we should be asking in addition to those 7, or maybe you just have a lot more answers to those questions than what we shared just now. So if you're able to go to Menti, we would love to hear your input. The code is, let's see. There's the code. Thanks, Mike. There's the Menti link. And we'll just give everybody a few minutes right now to share your thoughts. Just let us know if you're having any trouble accessing the Menti. Devanshi, do you want to go back for a moment to the slides so that folks can see what we have written up there? That would be great.
Oh, sorry, do you mean the presentation slide?
Yeah,
Okay, can you guys see the results though?
yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll just leave this up for maybe 2 minutes and then we can go back to the Menti results.
Are we good to go to Menti now?
Sure. Want to bring that page back up?
Sure.
All right. Thanks, Devanshi. Awesome. We've got a bunch of answers up here. Great. So just for example, we have folks asking what processes or ways can we engage and seek input to help improve access, reach the harder to reach populations? Great question. I think also as we go out into our breakout rooms, hopefully there will be an opportunity to address some of these barriers and maybe get advice from others who have dealt with these same questions in the past. Modern community engagement naturally has become more online. This may lead to barriers. Definitely, that's a great point. How can we develop AT solutions collaboratively with the communities that would benefit the most? How do we avoid a top-down approach? Also really good question. I'm seeing a lot of these related specifically to outreach and engagement. Are the equity deserving groups open to the new forms of travel like cycling? That's also a great question. I think that actually is very relevant for our next point. Do we want to give folks one more minute to answer and then we'll move on?
The Mentimeter is open, so they can answer as we are moving on, if that's okay.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. So if you do still have comments or questions you want to share, please do put them in. Thanks, Desi. All right, so before we move on to some examples that we're going to share, just wanted to share some really important reminders on the whole when we're talking about equity and AT. So this is a question that is so important. Who gets to exist safely on the streets? Do women, people with disabilities, underhoused individuals, LGBTQ plus folks, and racialized communities feel safe on the streets? Do they feel safe when they're biking? Do they feel safe on the bus? When it comes to AT, we're not only thinking about the physical infrastructure. There are so many other factors involved here. And when we're bringing in this equity lens, talking about safety is so critical. Not everybody feels safe when they leave their house and walk down the street or when they're on a bike. It's really important to be specifically thinking about these groups Somebody asked, are these equity deserving communities interested in cycling, for instance? Well, maybe they are, but maybe they don't feel safe on a bike. Maybe they don't know how to ride a bike. Maybe they don't have anybody to ride a bike with. So it's not only about implementing, putting in bike lanes. It's about asking, okay, if we do that, who will feel safe using those bike lanes, for example. It's about also thinking about making people feel happy and joyful when they go outside and are trying to go from place A to B. There are so many considerations that we need to be keeping in mind when we're thinking about the AT plans. So I just really wanted to emphasize this point, make sure that we're really constantly keeping in mind that we need to be prioritizing the equity seeking groups and remembering that they may have quite different needs from those who are currently being prioritized, let's say, in AT plans. So on the Equity Synergies Hub, we do have listed a lot of different actions that have been successfully implemented. We wanted to just focus on 3 here. I'm sure the folks on this call today know of lots of other examples that they could share. But just to give you 3. So first one, back during the pandemic, Oakland in California implemented the Slow Streets program. But they didn't just stop there. They put it into place and then they went out. They specifically engaged the lower income racialized communities in that area, gathered their feedback, went back and improved that Slow Streets program. So that's a really excellent example of how you can put something into action, go out, consult the community, and make the program even stronger than it was before. Next example is suburban cycling hubs. This is something that municipalities have the power to implement if they're interested. We put some examples here. The Caledon Bike Hub, Mississauga Cycles, Peel Community Cycling Program. So what's important in this case is that outside of the downtown core, often the suburbs are really lacking in public transportation option. So these sorts of cycling hubs really fill an important gap. And there are lots of non-infrastructure barriers that can also be addressed at the same time. So kind of like I was just mentioning previously, hubs such as this give people access to bikes who might not have that access, can teach people the skills that they might not have, and also just provide a safe and friendly community that people can join in. So this is a really cool opportunity that you can fill this gap, make sure that people who are not only in the downtown core do have access to active transportation. And example number 3. So this is based out of Toronto. Transportation Services developed this really cool equity lens tool. This is meant to help city staff identify the impacts of its initiatives on equity deserving groups specifically. So for instance, part of this meant using these NIAs or neighborhood improvement areas to identify locations for targeting their infrastructure investments. So as you can see, this equity lens tool specifically helps prioritize those equity seeking communities. And rather than just putting in the infrastructure where city staff thought it should go best, this tool really helped target the areas that needed those investments the most based on this equity data. So those were just 3 examples, and we're almost ready to move into our breakout rooms. But just finally wanted to kind of reiterate to folks here that Maybe some of you are thinking like, okay, well, we have our AT plan. We've implemented the plan, so I'm not really sure where to go from here. It kind of feels like we've done our work and that's about it. But it's super important to remember that this should really be an ongoing, continuous cycle of engagement and improvement. So what's best to start out with is really mapping out and identifying who are the equity deserving groups in my community. And that demographic might change over time for whatever reason. That leads us into the engagement side of things. So again, meeting people where they are, engaging in different sorts of methods to try to reach the widest amount of people, going into the data collection, again, focusing on disaggregating your data. And after you implement your plan, going back and evaluating, continually reassessing. As I mentioned, the equity seeking groups might be shifting over time. And so it's so important, you have your plan, you implement your action, and then that's not the end stage. We are continuing to go back, try to make things better, try to gain input from the community. It's this continual iterative process. So that brings us to our breakout rooms. I've done a ton of talking, and now we would love to hear from all of you. So we came up with 2 questions, which are hopefully helpful and can hopefully speak to some of the points you all raised in that Menti poll just now. So what we want to hear from you is, how could you capture, or how are you capturing, equity and climate synergies related to AT in your municipality? So if you have specific examples that you can share of what you're already doing, we would love to hear that. Or conversely, if you can think of ways that you could be introducing equity, but you're not currently doing that, we would still love to hear from you about that as well. Secondly, what limitations or barriers are you currently facing, or can you foresee? Some folks did mention some concerns they have, such as it's difficult at times to be reaching these communities who need to be consulted. And we want to be positive looking as well. So how might we overcome these limitations or barriers? If your municipality dealt with some of these barriers in the past and was able to successfully overcome those, that's wonderful. We would love for you to share that story with your group. So I believe we're going to be going into 4 breakout rooms, and Desi is going to set those up right now, and we'll be having about 20 minutes in each group, and then we'll come back together. Back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed those conversations. I was just jumping around through each breakout room, and it's clear that there are so many fantastic ways that equity is being integrated into your climate plans. Really inspiring just hearing what folks were sharing, just the little snippets that I heard. And I do want to emphasize, you all here are the experts. You're the ones on the ground doing this work, and we really want to hear what you're up to. So I will just point out that on the in the resource hub, we link on almost every page to a survey, or a survey that you can go to, and you can put in your examples, your questions, anything. It's basically just a chance for us to hear from you. So if you are able, if you can share, these initiatives that you have going on, things that you have enacted successfully, we would really encourage you to send us that, and then we'll put that up on the hub. You can also alternatively send me an email. I did see in the chat, it's disappeared now, but before somebody had mentioned that their municipality has, it was like a guide or report that they had developed. If you have resources like that, please do share them with us, because we want to add to this hub as much as possible. There's really no need to reinvent the wheel. So if folks already have really great initiatives underway, maybe other municipalities can learn from that and try to implement that in their own areas. Unfortunately, so we're nearing the end, which means we won't have time to do a report back. But we will be sending out, if I'm not mistaken, a recording of this webinar along with some of the findings from the breakout rooms.
Yeah, we
so
will
that folks-
summarize. Sorry, Emiko, we will summarize everything because in each break room we had a facilitator. So we'll be summarizing this and sending an email to everyone together with the recording and the presentation.
Perfect. Thanks, Tessie. Just noting as well that here are our 4 upcoming webinars. We really hope to see you there. And we also want to hear your feedback. So before you log off, just let us know what you thought of today's workshop. As you can see, each of our upcoming ones focus on different sorts of climate actions. So of course, they might not all be relevant to you, but we hope to see you at some of them. And again, really, really, really would encourage you to send us any resources you have so that we can put them right up on the hub. Really try to expand it as much as we can. And, you know, you're all doing such incredible work. We want to hear from you. We want to help you as much as we can, if that's possible. And thank you so much for joining us today. I think we're just going to end it there. Please do answer this poll before you run off. But I think that's it from us. Thank you so much, everybody. We hope to see you at our future sessions. Thank you so much to CAP staff for all your help today.